Today, times companies embarrass themselves. It's a good one, but first, this video is brought to you by Skillshare. More from them in a bit, but for now, let's get into it. When a product malfunctions, its buyer complains. When enough products malfunction and customers complain, the manufacturer may be prompted to issue a recall. Product recalls are rarely good news, but there's a world of difference between your average "there were 0.2% more bugs in this sausage than FDA regulations allow" recall and the ones that we're talking about today. These are companies panically realizing that they have been manufacturing products that can explode, catch fire, emit poison, or even kill people, and the unfortunate aftermath of those exact things happening. So, let's take a look at some of the worst product recalls of all time. Number 10. Dell notebook batteries. Mobile devices are everywhere, which means they need reliable batteries. However, every once in a while, the occasional defective one manages to make it through the production line, leading to all of those stories about exploding or otherwise malfunctioning batteries that you occasionally hear about in the news. Between 2004 and 2006, Dell had a slightly less than lucky run with said defective batteries when Sony delivered more than a few for their Inspiron, Latitude, and Precision laptops and XPS units. Soon, reports of Dell notebooks catching fire or even exploding started surfacing, and the company was facing one of the largest product recalls in history. The company realized that there were 4.1 million batteries at risk of catching on fire, which is almost 20% of Dell's computer sales during that time period. After some high-profile scandals, such as a Dell laptop bursting into flames at a conference, Dell and Sony ended up issuing a recall for all 4.1 million batteries. Number 9. Westland Hallmark beef. February 2008 was a bad time for Westland Hallmark Meatpacking Company in Chino, California. Not only was the company drawing accusations for treating its cows badly, the US Department of Agriculture was also on their tail. They had slaughtered cows that had lost the ability to walk after they had already passed pre-processed inspections without having them examined for chronic illness, which was a bad move during a time when mad cow disease was creating panic all over the Western world. Westland Hallmark paid a hefty price for their neglect when the Department of Agriculture forced them to recall the meat that had been potentially contaminated. All 143 million pounds of meat was recalled. If you have a hard time wrapping your head around that number, it's enough to make 2 delicious burgers for every single man, woman, and child living in the United States at the time. Number 8. Mattel Toys. As the maker of iconic toys such as Hot Wheels and Barbie dolls, it's easy to assume that Mattel would pay pretty close attention to keeping its products safe for children. Unfortunately, not all of the company's business partners bother with such trivialities. In 2007, Mattel announced a recall of no less than 967,000 toys after finding out that they were covered in poisonous lead paint. The toy giant managed to stop roughly 2/3 of the batch, which had been made by a Chinese contract manufacturer. However, an estimated 300,000 toys still made it to the shelves of American toy stores. These weren't just display action figures or over 12 years old stuff either. The 83 types of tainted products featured Nickelodeon and Sesame Street characters that were specifically aimed at toddlers. This was particularly hurtful for Mattel because the Chinese company that had betrayed them was no cost-cutting spring chicken that had just started working for them. This was a manufacturer that had been working with Mattel for 15 years, which means they were in full knowledge of all the rules and all the regulations of safe toy making, and yet something still went awry. Number 7. Ace Bio Beanbag Chairs. Ace Bio Beanbag Chairs were a popular and affordable piece of furniture that was sold widely by many popular retail stores and sites such as Walmart and Amazon. However, as you probably can guess by their presence on this list, their design had one serious safety flaw: the zipper. The Ace Bio Beanbag Chairs were equipped with a zipper that was so easy to open that even small children could do it. Unfortunately, this exact thing happened more than once, and because an opened beanbag seems like an inviting miniature ball pit, kids climbed right in, and some of them closed the zipper up behind them. We're not going to go into the depressing specifics here, so let's just say that an airtight sack full of choking hazards is not the safest environment for a small child. After 2 tragic deaths, Ace Bio promptly issued a voluntary recall for its beanbags and started to provide free repair kits that disabled the zipper. Number 6. The Hasbro Easy Bake Oven. Hasbro's Easy Bake Oven seems like a simple toy. That is, until you remember that it's quite literally a miniature oven that young children can easily stick their fingers in. For everyone who has ever seen a toddler, let alone witnessed its parents frantically baby-proof the electrical outlets of the house, this seems like a pretty massive safety risk. After all, small children love nothing more than sticking their hands in every possible place, regardless of the danger factor. With that in mind, please pretend to look surprised when we tell you that when Hasbro started using a genuine heating element instead of the traditional light bulb in the ovens in 2006, it took them less than a year to voluntarily issue a recall for 1 million Easy Bake ovens as toddlers kept sticking their hands inside the Easy Bakey part of the toy, resulting in occasionally serious burns when their baby sausage fingers connected with the brand new heating element. Later, in 2007, Hasbro repeated the process for another 1 million toy ovens. Between those two recalls, the toy company and the US Consumer Product Safety Commission had been bombarded with a total of 249 complaints about kids getting their hands stuck in the oven, 77 of which reported burns. One 5-year-old received such bad burns that her finger had to be partially amputated. Alright, so the top 5 are incoming, but first I need to tell you about Skillshare. Sponsors like Skillshare keep us making these videos, so supporting them supports us, which supports our videos. Skillshare is a platform with 29,000 classes for you to level up your design, business, video, social media, well, whatever skills you want to. Or you can just take those skills from nothing to something if you're starting from scratch as well. Skillshare also cover the basics. Me, I've taken courses in video production, obviously. I even took a course on how to go viral, which I was very skeptical about at first, but it's totally legit. Lately, I've been on a bit of a productivity binge as I want to squeeze out as much as possible from my day, obviously. I make 7 videos a week on this channel alone, and this is just one of 5 channels that I have. There's a great course from a chap called Thomas Frank on Skillshare, he's also a YouTuber by the way, on getting more stuff done in a day. It's great stuff, it's worth checking out if you want to get more done in a single day. So yes, Skillshare, just go do it, you'll like it. It's free for 2 months, so if you don't, not a big deal. Totally cancelable free trial, just $10 a month though if you do want to continue afterwards. No pressure. Support TopTenz by supporting Skillshare. It's a cool thing to do. Link below with that 2-month trial for the first 500 people who click. And let's get into that top 5, shall we? Number 5, Tylenol. Tylenol is a popular pain reliever that can nevertheless lead to massive complications up to and including liver failure when taken in large doses. It also has been the subject of several large-scale recalls over the years. In 2009, the manufacturer had to recall several Tylenol brands because a wood-treating chemical had somehow made its way into the medicine and was causing diarrhea, vomiting, and nausea to people who ingested it. Another disaster struck in 2011 when tens of thousands of Tylenol products had to be recalled over issues with quality control, and the problem became so large-scale that they had to close one of their manufacturing plants. In 2012, yet another 600,000 bottles of Tylenol for infants had to be recalled because dosing issues had turned the pill into a crapshoot of either too little or too much medicine. There have also been other, less significant recalls over mislabeling, development issues, or a strange, uncharacteristically moldy odor. However, the most infamous Tylenol product recall was no fault of the manufacturer. In 1984, someone in Chicago started tampering with bottles of extra-strength Tylenol, lacing them with poisonous cyanide. The poison killed 7 people before Johnson & Johnson, the manufacturer, had time to send warnings to distributors and hospitals, but they acted quickly and stopped advertisements and production of the drug and swiftly recalled an estimated 31 million bottles. The Chicago Tylenol murders remain unsolved to this day. Number 4, Jensen Farms. Cantaloupe may or may not be your favorite fruit, but even if you hate it from the bottom of your heart, eating it is unlikely to kill you. That is, unless you bought Jensen Farms Sweet Rocky Ford cantaloupes in 2011. A batch of the farm's product was contaminated with listeria, but nevertheless, it still made it into stores where the tainted cantaloupes proceeded to kill 33 people and made 147 people violently ill in an outbreak that spanned 28 US states. The listeria-laced melons were also linked to at least one miscarriage. After a hasty recall, the 2 brothers who owned the farm were arrested and later filed for bankruptcy. An investigation found that they had neglected to use a system that sprayed the melons with an antibacterial solution before packaging, despite the fact that they knew perfectly well that this could mean their product was contaminated. Unsurprisingly, federal charges followed, and the Jensen's farming career is ended with 6 counts of adulteration of food and aiding and abetting. In 2014, the brothers were each sentenced to 5 years probation and 6 months home detention, complete with 100 hours of community service and $150,000 of restitution payments. While this might seem like a slap on the wrist for men who were responsible for so many deaths, there were some mitigating factors at play. The case managed to prompt stricter food safety laws and liabilities on producers, and many of the victims' family members also agreed that the apologetic Jensens should face no prison time. It's also fairly uncommon to actually charge food producers for food safety issues, and the FDA made it clear the Jensen's case was specifically meant to send a message to other food producers out there. Number 3. The Ford-Firestone tire recall. When hundreds of people die because of a defective product, you know that someone somewhere has messed up in a serious way. Unfortunately, Ford and tire manufacturer Firestone had a hard time agreeing on which one of them was the true culprit in 2000 to 2001 when Firestone's 15-inch Wilderness AT Radial ATX and ATX2 tire treads started separating from the tire's cores. This led to many nasty and movie-worthy rollovers and crashes, and of course, countless human tragedies. Most of the defective tires were custom equipment for the Ford Explorer, which happened to be the world's best-selling SUV at the time. Firestone immediately and apparently genuinely believed they had managed to sort the problem out and acted accordingly, but more and more accidents kept piling up, and Ford was not happy, especially when Firestone started claiming that the problem wasn't just the tires, but design flaws in the Explorer itself. The back and forth between the two companies was a bitter one and reached epic levels that involved congressional hearings and the recall of 6.5 million tires. The situation came to a head in 2001 when the exasperated Ford promised to replace all 13 million Firestone Wilderness AT tires out there at their own expense. Firestone wasn't having any of it and severed their nearly 100-year business relationship with Ford. The defective tires caused 200+ deaths and over 800 injuries and countless lawsuits. Executives resigned, new laws were forged, and in a development that shocked absolutely no one, the tire company's market value was cut in half. Number 2. Toyota's faulty floor mats. Cars have tons of parts that can cause a massive disaster if they don't function properly, but you wouldn't necessarily expect the floor mat to be one of them. As Toyota proved to the world in 2009, you'd be wrong to assume that when they announced the recall of almost 4 million Toyota and Lexus cars, including 2005 to 2009 editions of the popular hybrid Prius. The problem, as you can probably imagine, is that the car floor mats would become dislodged and then they get stuck under the accelerator, which could lead to every driver's worst nightmare: unintended, uncontrolled, and dangerous acceleration. This happened in the most dramatic way possible when a highway patrolman found to his horror that the doormat of his Lexus had got stuck under the accelerator and it accelerated him to 100 miles per hour. The patrolman was able to call 911 and explain the terrifying situation and was on the phone when the fatal crash came. As accidents started piling up, the FBI started to become interested. The ensuing investigation revealed that Toyota had downplayed the unintended acceleration problem, which also included issues with sticky pedals and plenty of allegations that they kept making cars despite being well aware of the potentially lethal issues. In 2014, the manufacturer agreed to pay a massive $1.2 billion in order to avoid prosecution for its safety issues. The agreement also forced Toyota to admit misleading American consumers and making deceptive statements about serious safety issues. By then, the car company's long-standing acceleration troubles had killed 89 people and injured a further 57, and the company had recalled over 8 million vehicles. Number 1. Ford Pinto. Yep, Ford again, and if you know anything about bad cars, you might actually have seen this one coming. The Ford Pinto was one of the best-selling cars of the 1970s, right up to the moment it turned out that the car was basically a fireball waiting to happen. A massive and tragic flaw in the Pinto's design made the vehicle's gas tank vulnerable to rear-end collisions, which could create an explosion and turn the car into a fiery death trap. Unfortunately, many of the owners found this out in the worst possible way. Faulty Ford Pintos caused around 500 deaths and hundreds of injuries before 1978, when Ford agreed to recall 1.5 million of the vehicles, along with 30,000 Mercury Bobcats with similar design issues. The product scandal left Ford's reputation in tatters, especially when it emerged that the fatal design flaw was the result of a very cynical cost-benefit analysis. Auto industry superstar Lee Lauker, who had presided over the Pinto's creation, was unceremoniously fired, and Ford's lawyers had to put in some serious overtime dealing with the 117 lawsuits filed by disgruntled customers. The recall also prompted a 1979 landmark case, Indiana and Ford Motor Co., which marked Ford as the first American corporation that was indicted and prosecuted for criminal homicide. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe. Also, if you want to support us, the best thing to do is to head on over to Skillshare.com/TopTenz. There's also a link below. Supporting Skillshare supports us. It's also awesome. So there's that. And thanks for watching.